Elon Musk is a role model for people with and without Asperger syndrome, but some still say that he's not a genius. His parents were rich, his IQ isn't over 160, and he didn't found his companies on his own. In this video, I'm going to give you evidence of Musk's genius and whether his Asperger syndrome is what gave it to him. It's going to be quite difficult to do that, but luckily we have some really powerful tools, including comparisons with his neurotypical younger brother, Kimbal. If you don't know who I am, my name is Sermed, and I am a London doctor. I find health facts and deliver them to you faster than Amazon Prime, but for free. So if that's something you're into, hit the sub button, turn the bell on, and hit like so more people like you can benefit from the facts here. I'm gonna go straight into the meat of the video, and before we get to Elon Musk's genius, I'm gonna talk through what Asperger syndrome is. For those of you who's been watching my channel before, you'll know I have made a video about this, so I will go over it briefly. It is a mixture of really two things. One, impairment of social functioning, and two, restrictive, repetitive, and stereotype patterns of behavior, interests, or activities. What does that mean? It means that the child doesn't have the ability to really show their emotions. It's kind of a all or nothing situation, and they can either be really happy, really angry, or completely flat when communicating. And also it can come across as though they don't understand other people's emotions as well. Although a lot of patients with Asperger syndrome actually are hyper empathetic, it's just that they do not have the ability to show that emotion. The other thing is that there is this pattern of obsession, fixation on activities. Some kids it can be games, some kids it can be patterns, blocks. Other kids it can be mathematics, physics, mechanics, all these kinds of things which they become focused on. They like order, discipline. So you can see that there are some disadvantages but potential advantages there as well. So the interesting thing about Asperger syndrome is back in 2013, the manual of psychiatric conditions basically excluded it as a diagnosis, and so it's not a medical diagnosis anymore. It's now part of something called autism spectrum disorder. Does that mean people don't use the term anymore? Absolutely not. They do, and people with autism have the right to identify in whatever way they so desire. It's just that the medical field does not use that to give a new diagnosis anymore. So for the purposes of this video, I will use the term Asperger syndrome and use it interchangeably with level 1 autism spectrum disorder. Don't get confused by that. The word autism itself actually comes from the Greek word autos, which means self. Patients with autism actually tend to like the company of themselves. For those of you that are critical, I will go into this in more detail, especially the stigma side of autism spectrum disorder and Asperger syndrome, so stick around to watch that. Next, onto the genius of Elon Musk. So first I'm going to define what genius is, then we'll talk about the traits of it that were in Elon Musk's childhood, his achievements, and then his comparison now to his neurotypical younger brother, Kimbal. Genius is defined by the Oxford Dictionary as someone who demonstrates unusually great intelligence, skill, or artistic ability. Now, Musk was always interested in comic books and sci-fi when he was growing up. He was actually seen as a bit of a nerd and a bit of a freak, sadly. Sorry to say that. It does make me upset hearing that word. Nobody should be treated like that. But he really was deep into his own thoughts and into being with himself. It's to the point where his parents actually thought he was deaf because they would call him and he wouldn't respond. They even got him a hearing test to make sure, and he passed with flying colors, like he would any other exam. So it came to the point where he was actually being called dumb by his own parents, including his father. So even now it carries on, and I'll show you a clip of that later on. Moving on to around 1981, 1982, the first ever domestic computer was released. And Musk was really interested in that because, you know, he was a logical child. He could imagine how different these could make the world. So he asked his dad to get him one of these computers. Now, at that time, it wasn't so simple as it is now, where you can literally just open up the laptop and you've got the entire world sitting there in front of you. You actually would have to do a course to use this brick of a computer, and the only course was run by these English professors in South Africa at the time, which is where Elon Musk lived. He was about 11 years old, and his dad, because of his reputation as an engineer and his notoriety there, he managed to get him a place on that course. So they go, and Dad and Kimbal end up leaving Elon at the lecture theatre while this computer course is going on to teach Elon how to use it. Now, when they come back from getting burgers, there was no one else in the lecture theatre either. So they found Elon afterwards outside in the corridor with his tie off, his shirt unbuttoned, jacket off, and he was speaking to the English professors, having an intelligent conversation about computing at the age of 11. Elon Musk, who's Elon's father, then says to the professor, you know, should I get him a computer? And the professor says, absolutely, you need to get this child a computer. So Errol complied, which was quite possibly the start of Musk's interest in the tech world. It didn't stop there though. Elon Musk then taught himself how to code and create a game called Blastar, which he then sold to a magazine for $500 back when he was just 12 years old. Can you imagine? Now, most children at 12 years old are learning how to interact with each other, making best friends, basically becoming part of the social circle, and they are changing their behaviors and activities to be involved in that group. You can see the difference between Kimbal and Elon. Kimbal wanting to go get the burger with his dad, and Elon just sitting there being so fixated, interested in this computing, even though he had to join the first ever computing class in South Africa to be able to get that. So you can see, first of all, where the differences are starting to unfold between the two. The neurotypical brother and the child with Asperger Syndrome, who's less interested in social activity. It's kind of like he didn't have any distractions at that time. Now, if you go to this interview between Errol and Elon Musk for the first time ever, which happened in 2013, it was actually so interesting. I watched all 46 minutes of it for you, and I will summarize the best bits here. So I do the work so you don't have to. Basically, during that time, they talk about the next venture, which was Zip2, which basically was a company that Elon Musk coded in 1995 and then sold off later in about 1999 for $300 million. $300 million. He was 28 years old when he sold that company. He started it with his brother, but Musk was the coding arm of that company. He basically did all of the physical, technical work on the project. So take a look at this clip when Elon was talking about what they had to do to actually get Zip2 off the ground.
At 95, we literally, at the beginning, we had one computer, which would be the web server during the day, and then at night, I'd program on it. And
we'd sleep in the office.
Yeah,
so we couldn't afford to have an apartment.
It was cheaper to rent the office than to rent an apartment, so we just rented the office and slept in the office and showered at the YMCA.
You can see the pure dedication they had, and clearly they didn't have very much money at that time because they were sleeping in an office and showering at the YMCA, which is not something that millionaires really do, because at that point their dad had divorced the mum. He actually divorced her back in 1979, so Musk was just 8 at that point. So there was quite a tenuous relationship with a dad who was actually quite abusive. Anyways, moving on. If you look into other bits of that interview, they're very, very interesting. One of the really underrated traits of Musk is how he can convey an idea to an audience in a way that they understand its importance as much as he does. Take a look at when Kimbal is asked about what they did with Zip2, how it started. See how he explains it.
We went on a road trip from Silicon Valley to Philadelphia, and it was in '94, and we were both, I'm younger than Elon, but we were both finishing school at the same time, because I'm much smarter than him. Elon actually was doing a double major, so that's why. But anyway, so we ended up doing that, and we started with a network medical database. Remember that?
And now look how Elon describes it when he takes over. He says there's a bunch of iterations.
Well, there were a bunch of iterations, but I think the thought in '95 was that the internet was going to be something really that fundamentally changed humanity. It was like humanity acquiring a nervous system.
Now, did you see the difference there? So Kimbal is actually talking about it from like a chronological, person-based perspective, like he's actually reliving the event. But when Elon talks about it, he speaks about it as a concept. Like you can imagine both of them playing back a video recording, and Kimbal has a handheld camera and Elon has a drone.
It was like humanity acquiring a nervous system.
Was just I literally couldn't even describe how incredible this experience was.
There's so many other examples of that as well. Like, look at this clip when Elon is talking about when computers first came into action, and this was why he left his PhD degree at Stanford.
As mentioned, I was quite interested in electric cars from when I was doing my undergrad physics, and in fact, I originally came out to California to do a PhD at Stanford in applied physics and material science to work on ultracapacitors in electric cars. So it was a long-standing interest of mine, and the internet kind of put that on hold for a few years. But then after PayPal, I decided I wanted to get back into electric vehicles and make something happen in that arena.
And then contrast that with when Kimbal was talking about how he was basically fueled to take food on as his career after 9/11.
I graduated from cooking school just before 9/11, and I lived right behind the World Trade Center, so I saw everything happen. It was a very big event in my life. The rare opportunity it gave me was the opportunity to cook for the firefighters. So I spent 6 weeks at Ground Zero cooking for the firefighters, and that's when I I always loved food, but my passion for community and connecting people to each other through food was just I literally couldn't even describe how incredible this experience was.
I understand Kimbal is emotional and he has that fire in him, and he feels like he can communicate the importance of his love for food through that. But it's clear that Elon Musk's message, the central meaning, the truth that he delivers with his words and his concept actually hit home so much deeper than the way that Kimbal explains things. It's really interesting to see the contrast. And I feel like Elon says it, when you think about a problem, you should really try and get down to the truth. And I feel that his Asperger syndrome helps him filter out all of the other distractions and kind of social nuances that a lot of people actually get drawn into and bogged down by, but he can just see straight through. And we relate to that when he conveys his message. That's a huge part of being a businessman as well, because a lot of it is not just about you having faith in your own work, but also getting other people to have faith in it too. Keep in mind, Elon does not have an engineering degree. Did you know that? He has a physics degree, he has an economics degree. All of the engineering is being done by other people, or he's been self-taught. If that is not genius, I do not know what is. But it's interesting though that the other side of the coin is that he never really talks about relationships. And throughout the whole of that interview, and even other interviews that I've seen of him, he always looks at things from a truth perspective, from a humanity perspective, from a conceptual perspective, never really from a personal or interpersonal perspective. Now I'm going to quickly talk about some of the criticisms of Elon Musk and maybe where they arise from. A lot of people, when they hear stories of others being successful, they react in a certain way. You either feel inspired, or if you're quite competitive naturally, it's easy to feel demoralized. If that's the case, then obviously you try and find ways to make yourself feel better. It happened to me. My mom, she used to tell me, your cousins in Iraq, they made a gym and they've sold it, you know, what are you doing now? So, you know, sometimes I would feel demoralized like that when I was younger, and I've tried to get over that. I've tried to be happy for other people's successes. But if you are quite competitive, you always do look for that justification of why is this person done so well. And I think that's why a lot of the criticisms of Musk have come from, you know, looking at things that have obviously advantaged him.
Elon's concerned, I worry, you know, because what now? What else is there? I mean, I start worrying that he boredom, you know, that he might suddenly get bored just sending stuff up to for NASA every week or 2 weeks. I mean, you know, this is becoming passe, you know.
Yeah.
So that worries me about Elon, because if he's one of those people, he certainly was as a boy, if he suddenly decides it's not interesting anymore, he just sort of drops it.
Yeah.
But I doubt he'll do that, but I'm just saying it worries me.
Now, I'm not saying that he didn't come from a privileged position. Yes, he did. But so many other people have, and didn't end up becoming multi-billionaires with many different companies. It's a matter of many different stars aligning all at the same time to create a perfect storm. Now, the other thing is, I know lots of people also say that labeling someone as Musk as a genius because of Asperger's is bad for other people with Asperger's. But the majority feel inspired by it, that someone who's been diagnosed with the condition can go ahead and be so successful. So I prefer to sit on the kind of sunny side of that debate. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it's been very useful for you. Go watch my other video on Musk if you did find it interesting, and leave me a comment. What did you think? Do you think Musk's genius is related to his Asperger's? I certainly think so.
Author Steve Silberman states that autism and other mental conditions should be seen as naturally human, naturally part of a human spectrum, and not as defects.